Well, the protesters and demonstrators who have ruled the streets of Central Florida and the nation say they have had it and they want change now. And joining us this afternoon on the topic, Dr. Eric Smaw. He is an associate professor at Rollins College in Winter Park and also a member of the National Board of the American Civil Liberties Union. Good to see you, Dr. Smaw. Thank you very much for spending some time with us. Talk to me about the death of George Floyd and the protests that have followed.
So I think what the nation has seen is the tragic death of George Floyd. And the reason why we're getting so much response to it is because I believe a lot of African-American males believe that they could have been George Floyd. And a lot of African-American women believe that their sons or husbands could have been George Floyd. And European Americans see that the death was clearly unjust. And that's why we're getting so much response to it.
The Floyd family has said they are about peace, and one of George's brothers actually had mentioned earlier this week that seeing all of the violence and the rioting that has come with some of the protests is just not what they are all about.
Yes, they have said that, and I think you raise an excellent point. So I want to point out two things. First, the protesters themselves have done an excellent job of explaining that the people who you see rioting and looting are not members of their groups, but rather they're people who come from the outside and have infiltrated their group and started rioting and looting as a way of trying to cast aspersions on the protest itself. So that's the first point.
That is very common, because when I lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, back in 2016, when we had the unrest in the Sherman Park neighborhood in Milwaukee, we had heard of a lot of people coming from out of the city and out of state. And the most common thing that we had heard from the folks in Sherman Park is, we're not going to do this to our own neighborhood.
Yes. That's exactly right. It is common. In fact, it happened during the civil rights movement with the Dr. King protests. There were people who wanted to cast aspersions on Dr. King's nonviolent civil disobedience movement. So they infiltrated the movement, and as the protests started, they would riot and loot and start fights. And so I think it's important for us to say, yes, that's happening, but it's not the protesters themselves. And I often point out to people that, look, sometimes you will get this with protests. It's not unusual. When we look at the protest in Hong Kong, we find that there has been over $600 million in property damage. And even our most celebrated protest is the Boston Tea Party. And the Boston Tea Party is a story about people who went onto ships, took the property off those ships, and then dumped the property into the Boston Harbor, thereby destroying it. So it's not uncommon that you'll see this happen with protests, but it's not happening with this protest. It's people from the outside.
What is asymptomatic racism, Dr. Smaw?
So you raise an excellent question here. Asymptomatic racism is people who hold racist beliefs, but they don't act in typical racist ways that we've seen in the past. So, for example, we know from the FBI's intelligence assessment report in 2006 that some Ku Klux Klan members have infiltrated some police departments throughout the country. They don't wear hoods, they don't wear sheets, they don't speak in typical language, but they do hold all the beliefs. So they don't display symptomatic characteristics that we would associate with racism, but they are racist. So that's what I call asymptomatic racist. That's sort of extreme example. The non-extreme examples would be somebody like Amy Cooper in Central Park.
How does one react to it and learn?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to the extreme examples, it's going to require something like our intelligence agencies like the FBI and the CIA to do reviews of police departments in order to identify those people and have them removed from our police and agencies. When it comes to the less extreme examples with people like I mentioned, Amy Cooper, it takes self-evaluation and self-assessment on our parts, or close friends and family members helping us to do that self-evaluation and self-assessment. And then we're able to change ourselves. So that would be one thing I would say that we could do that's really easy. And we're often changing over time. So it's a natural process for people to change. So if self-evaluation with the help of family members and friends can help people with asymptomatic racist dispositions change.
I'm running out of time, but I want to make sure I get this in. In our last minute together, I've been seeing, with the protests that have been happening in Central Florida, Orlando, and across the nation, it's been all different races. It's been all different age groups as well. You've been seeing a lot of very young, much younger people, getting involved in these. What do you think that's going to do without, necessarily getting political? What do you think this is? How do you think this is going to play into the November election? Because some people have been feeling we don't have leadership, while others, just really depending on what side of the aisle you're on. What do you think this is going to do when it comes time for the November election?
Yeah, so I am excited about the fact that there are so many different people from different age groups and ethnicities and religions and racial backgrounds all participating in this protest. I think what the people have said to us is that we promised them a just nation, a nation where everyone is treated equally and fairly. And what they're seeing is that such a nation doesn't exist. But they all believe that America can be that nation. And so they're asking our politicians to step up and make the changes that are necessary to achieve the sort of nation that we promised that they will have. And so I believe that this will spur a lot of people to vote in the November election and subsequent elections. And I think as a result of those votes, we will see social and political, maybe even economic change for the better in this country.
Rollins College professor Dr. Eric Smaw, thank you for joining us on the afternoon edition. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.